And we're back in the studio like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your late Saturday afternoon here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today marks 45 years since a sporting event, an international athletics competition, which was known then and will be known forevermore as the Miracle on Ice. On February 22nd, 1980, a United States Olympic team with nothing but amateurs. This is a dozen years before Michael Jordan and the Dream Team trashed everybody at the 92 Olympics. That came about because other countries around the world were using professional athletes while we were using amateurs and or college kids, and US, and I thought it was a good idea. I get tired of watching everybody celebrate at the expense of our 18 and 19-year-old kids. But in 1980, the United States sent a team of amateurs, of many of whom were successful college players. But in the Olympics, they're going against some of the finest professional hockey players from around the world. In particular, the Russian team, the feared Russian team, which, Olympics aside, they were the best team in the world, period. And somehow, in the semifinal game, it feels like it should have been the finals and that the victory would have been for the gold medal, but it just got them to the gold medal game. Would have been quite an anticlimax if they had lost the gold medal game to Finland, but then we wouldn't remember the story as fondly if they had. On February 22nd, 1980, the United States Olympic team at Lake Placid, upstate New York, defeated the Russians in the semifinal game to get to the gold medal game, which they ended up winning. And that is the Miracle on Ice. Now, I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of the hockey game. I am not a hockey person. I've lived my entire life on Long Island. I grew up kind of an Islanders fan, but hockey was never my sport. In the scale of the four major sports, baseball, football, basketball, hockey. So hockey was never a big deal. Rangers, Islanders, Devils, root for whoever you like. I don't care. I'm not a militant hockey fan, as I am and have always been with baseball. Root for the Yankees, hope that the Mets lose pretty much every game. I'm not quite as hardcore as I used to be. I used to actually watch the Met games rooting for them to lose. I'm going to talk about a fool's errand. That's it. But hockey is not my sport. I love, as you know, to talk movies. We get into some fitness, some health, mindset, real life stuff. But movies, where it's at. My degree from New York University, for those who don't know, was in cinema studies. So rather than just talk about the game 45 years ago, I want to talk about the 2004 movie directed by Gavin O'Connor and starring Kurt Russell and Patricia Clarkson. The movie, not surprisingly, is called Miracle. And it is about the miracle on ice. But it's more than just that. It gets deep within the psyche of, you could say, a real life, from a sports perspective, hero, Herb Brooks, who coached the Rangers, I don't remember what years, but at a certain point in time was a successful coach. He had coached the University of Minnesota college hockey team. And in a very long, incredibly distinguished career. Kurt Russell was a child star. For those who don't know, and some of you new to the channel probably don't know this, Kurt Russell was a star from when he was a boy, a kid. He was in the TV show The Fugitive with David Janssen in the early 60s. I think he was 8. He was just a kid. And in many cases, child stars have a lot of bumps along the way. There are very few child stars who had a seamless transition to being major movie stars. Kurt Russell is just about the only one. You could say Christian Bale, but in the case of Kurt Russell, he almost perfectly jumped from doing child roles with Disney. He was a contract player with Disney. The Walt Disney was one of his biggest supporters. And he kind of turned sometime in the 70s. He stopped making these sort of silly Sunday night showcase Disney movies like the computer wore tennis shoes, and he started making real movies. He did an Elvis film, I think, in the late 70s, and most famously, in the eyes of a lot of people, John Carpenter's The Thing. Kurt was still a very young man. He shot that film, I think he was about 26, but he was born to be a movie star. And he's a terrific baseball player too, minor league level baseball player. Kurt Russell, just one of those people, if he weren't such a nice guy, you wouldn't like him, that kind of individual. But in his sort of long, distinguished career, if I'm asked what are his best performances, this is one of them. I would say that what he does in Breakdown, which is a 1997 film, came out kind of the beginning of the summer and was sort of a sleeper hit, but it should have done even better than it did. I have actually talked about his performance in Breakdown for the Most Underrated Performances series. I think that that's about as good as he could ever do. He was the right age to play that kind of character. A guy's name was Jeff Taylor. Kurt was in his early 40s at the time. And that's a hell of a thriller. They're just an incredible, taut action thriller, but set within the real world. It's not fantastical like Big Trouble in Little China or The Thing or even Tango and Cash, if we're being honest. Nothing in Tango and Cash could ever really happen. I like he and Sly looked great together. They made a good kind of antagonistic buddy pairing. But what Kurt does in Miracle, and it's to the credit of O'Connor, the filmmaker, Long Island native, by the way, I think from Huntington originally, went to big school, University of Pennsylvania. They don't give out the diplomas there, that's for damn sure. But Gavin O'Connor, as the filmmaker, he could have made a different movie, because there's a version of this film where they kind of fast forward through how the United States even got to play the Russians the match before the gold medal round. But instead of that, we get to know Herb Brooks intimately. We see that his relationship with his wife, they've, presumably been together at least 15 years by this point in time. They have a solid marriage, and Patricia Clarkson, a multiple Oscar nominee, or maybe she was only up for one, but she's a very strong actress. She has a great face for the movies, and her line readings are always on point, and she matches Kurt's energy as Herb Brooks, and Herb kind of pulls off. Herb had a tricky accent, and Kurt nails it. He really hits the marks with the accent. It's some of his best acting just from the craftsmanship standpoint. But the role of Patty, the wife, it could be a thankless role. But Patricia Clarkson brings so much depth and humanity to the part. It doesn't feel thankless. She feels like an important person in Herb Brooks' life, not just, well, that's just his wife. It's really good film acting from Patricia Clarkson. It's easily could be a dismissed kind of thankless role, but she makes the character of Patty memorable. But Herb Brooks was a complicated individual. I feel like the movie made him seem like even more of a hard ass than he actually was, at least in terms of how he dealt with the players. But it works, and we buy what Kurt is selling, which is that sometimes when it comes to team sports, raw talent is enough. Case in point, the Dream Team in 1992, where you had Michael Jordan and you had Karl Malone and David Robinson. You had this unbelievable collection and assemblage of talent. They were all great players individually. And whether or not they played properly as a unit, they just were so damn good, blowing everybody out by 40 points, 50 points. Most of the games were over in the first quarter. There wasn't much. But Herb Brooks, in putting together his team, there's one line, and I think this was from the real Herb Brooks, because we see him trying to select the team. We actually first see him trying to get the job coaching the United States hockey team to prepare for the 1980 Olympics. And when he gets the gig, the way that he explains himself to the USOC, the U.S. Olympic Committee, we see what makes him tick and how he not only sees hockey, but how he sees team and teamwork and trying to find something other than just a bunch of really good hockey players. And so there are moments where he gets rid of certain people very early in the film who are hugely talented. And the line that he says is, I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right ones. As he says, I'm looking for the right ones. Sometimes it is about how a bunch of disparate personalities mesh or don't mesh. And we've certainly seen in team sports where it appears to be a synergy where the unit together, it's greater than the sum of the individual parts. And just for reference, way back in 1998, when the New York Yankees had one of the great years, you could argue it's the greatest individual season a baseball team has ever had. They went 125-50, including the postseason. Now, at the time, a lot of people pointed out something which could have ended up being true. They said, this Yankee team is just raking. They are just smashing everybody, and there are no surefire Hall of Famers on this roster. Now, that was accurate at the time. Derek Jeter was in his third season, and Mariano Rivera was in also his third season. Nobody knew what those guys were going to end up being, but that Yankee team did end up having a bunch of Hall of Famers. But the U.S. Olympic hockey team of 1980, they had some guys who had decent pro careers, such as Jim Craig and Ken Morrow and a few others. But this was just a bunch of very talented kids who, when put together, were greater than they should have been. And so we follow Herb Brooks, Kurt as Herb, as he goes through the torturous, legitimately torturous process of trying to condition the athletes physically for the rigors of very serious Olympic competition. You know, we don't necessarily, as non-athletes or non-elite athletes, think about the physical toll. You're playing a sport that you grew up playing, let's say, and you enjoy playing it. But there are certain sports that are not meant to be played one day after another, after another, after another. You need breaks. This is why you have a week between football games, that you don't play football every night. This is not baseball. It's hockey. It is a brutal sport. And I remember just watching as a kid, why do they keep switching out every minute or so? You ever try playing hockey and skates? No, I've never played hockey and I can't skate. Well, then keep your mouth shut. Nobody ever said keep your mouth shut to me, but the idea was I didn't get it. Why can't they just stay out there the whole time? Well, what do you think, this is baseball? No. I didn't get it. But Herb Brooks pushed the players physically, but he also had to push them mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. And at times, he is like a stern father figure. Other times, he's worse. But then there are the moments where he's, as much as he tries to maintain an icy reserve and a distance from the players, because after all, he might be cutting somebody the next day. He could act like he's their buddy, and then a day later, they're off. But he has to find some kind of balance. How do I get them ready in every possible way? And even under the most optimal circumstances, they got no better than a 5, maybe a 10% chance to beat the Russians, maybe. But that's the thing with hockey. Unlike basketball, the reality is the 1992 Dream Team could have played any of those countries 1,000 times. I don't know that they ever lose a game. I don't know that they lose. Maybe once. Maybe. But the ease with which they ran through those Olympics suggested they weren't going to lose. Because basketball, yes, there are some bad bounces and some breaks, but generally speaking, basketball is a sport where if you athletically overpower your opponent, you're just too good for them, you're going to win. Same with football. Football even more so. And baseball. But hockey, there's a lot of variance, and this is why you occasionally will see a team with a kind of a crappy regular season record make deep runs. You don't see that very often in the other major sports. It can happen in football, especially the way teams with the schedules where you could have a team that's 8-7 or 9-7 or now 9-8. But you look at the schedule and they played nothing but 12 and 13 win teams. But generally speaking, hockey has the most variance because you don't score a lot of goals in most games. And sometimes it's a matter of a bad bounce, a lucky bounce, a referee call that gets missed. There are so many intangibles and variables in hockey. So Herb Brooks prepared his players, and Kurt Russell as Herb, gets his guys as prepared, as ready as humanly possible. But even with that, shit happens. You get out on the ice and you might get injured, or you wake up with the flu one day, and what do? And as much as Herb Brooks was a taskmaster, he was tough, and Kurt gets all of that across, deep down, he just wanted to win, because his personal story, and this is some of Kurt's best acting when we realize this in the film, that he was on the 1960 U.S. team, and he ended up not making the trip. He got substituted out at the last possible minute. So he understands how brutal it could be to go through the rigorous training and all of the preparation to get yourself as fit as humanly possible in every way, and then you don't even end up making the trip. Horrifying, but an unfortunate reality of elite level amateur sports. So one of the things that this movie does so well is take true events and blend them with recreations. So for example, there is footage of a game where I think an all-star team of players from the NHL, I don't know if they were only Americans, that part I don't recall, but they played a game at Madison Square Garden, and the Russian national team, the team that was going to go to the Olympics, just beat the shit out of them. They just smashed them. And then there was the game they played, like kind of a prep, like a warm-up game with the guys, and they got blasted in that one too. So everything was trending in the direction of the United States team will be lucky to even medal, to even make the medal round in the Olympics. And Kurt and Patricia Clarkson, as Herb and Patty, have a moment when they're in Lake Placid. And it's not really a spoiler kind of thing, but it's a moment where it's almost out of his hands. And he knows that he has done everything that he can to get them ready. But it's just going to be up to the guys. What's going to happen when they go out there? Now, the most famous scene in this film, I believe, is a sequence where it's before the Olympics, and the guys are losing. They're losing a game. It's not a critically important game, so to speak. It's, kind of a preparatory game. And there's a little bit too much sort of goofing around on the bench during the game. Now, it's not like you're going to be taking notes when you have your gear on, but you should always be mindful of what's happening on the ice. What Herb Brooks would say is you should always be working, trying to see things on the ice. Hey, maybe if I do this the next time I'm in that position, whatever it might be. But the guys are kind of goofing off a little bit. They're staring at girls, they're making eye contact, whatever it might be. So he makes them do line drills where they basically skate from one side to the other and back, and they just keep doing the drill again and again and again. And Herb Brooks, this happened. I don't think it happened as insanely as what we see in the film. But actor, Toby Emmerich? I normally don't like him, but he plays Craig Patrick, who also was a coach in the NHL. This movie, he was perfectly cast. He's somebody who always seems miscast. I thought he was miscast a little bit in frequency, and maybe Truman Show, he's pretty good there too. Okay. But this movie, I think his performance is perfect. And he's the guy with the whistle in the scene where Kurt Russell's Herb Brooks is just really beating the hell out of his guys in every possible way. They're puking on the ice, and he's not letting them leave. You want to fuck around when it's game time? You want to fuck around on my time? I'm going to keep you here as long as I think I need to. And that's the sort of balance between, I don't give a shit, I'm just going to push these guys as hard as I can, and no, they can take it. They've made it this far. These guys are the right guys, and there is no way I can push them too far. They're just going to come back, and they're going to play harder. And so when you get into the Olympics, it's sort of a double elimination kind of a tournament. I don't really understand how they worked out the particulars of it, but the U.S. team plays poorly, and they end up getting a tie to advance to kind of the next round, if you want to call that the medal round. And they were very fortunate to do that, because it seemed that each game they're always on the defensive. They're on their heels and they're behind. And given how powerful the Russian team was, when they get to face them, cliche though this may be, this was in real life as well as the movie, nobody's given them a chance. And we hear that all the time. Nobody gave us a chance. But for real, nobody was giving them a chance. And Kurt even says before the game to his guys, we are going to beat these guys. If we play 10 times, they're going to win at least 9. We're going to win that one. And it's right now. But motivation only takes you so far. When you get out on the ice, when you get out there, it's all on you. Manager, coach can only do so much. And not surprisingly, the Russians break out to an early lead. But the U.S. kids hit back, they hit hard, and they do just enough to get back into the game where they're down a goal. And ironically, the Russian coach, this also happened in real life, he kind of panics and he pulls his goalie with them still in the lead. And the guy was considered the best goalie in the world at the time. Not really a great idea. The U.S. team continues to rally, and history tells us that they ended up taking the lead. And the goal, which would end up being the game winner, was scored by the captain of the team, who some people would have said was probably the weakest player overall on the squad, named Mike Eruzione. And he was somebody that was kind of fortunate that he even made the team, because in the world of the movie, if you don't know who he is, you keep thinking this guy is going to get cut. But he doesn't. Thank goodness he did not get cut. And the way the film plays and shows us all of the emotions and how Kurt's representation of Herb Brooks, he doesn't want to show too much emotion in front of the players, even in front of the fans. And when they end up winning the game, surviving a nerve-wracking, and the real footage is also incredibly nerve-wracking. The Russians seemed to the puck was in the United States zone for at least the last 5 minutes, it felt like. The U.S. just could not clear the puck. They couldn't really mount any offense to kind of kill more time in the Russian zone. And Jim Craig was like prime Patrick Waugh when he had to be. Just one great save, one kick save, one elbow pad save, whatever it was, after another. There's another great moment for Kurt Russell, certainly a top 5 best moments in his career. When the game is over, and yeah, he's kind of celebrating with his guys, but he doesn't want to put too much emotion out there. He goes off where he's by himself, and he celebrates on his own. He pumps his fists, and he is overcome with emotion. And it's another moment that a different filmmaker might not have included in the film. Because you could make this movie in 1 hour and 40. You could do it. But O'Connor wanted to give us the total picture. He wanted to give us a full accounting of Herb Brooks and Patty Brooks and the doctor and all of the guys who end up. And some of them, there's some great players that just missed making the Olympic team, and that's something that that also really happened, similar to the real Herb Brooks just missing the Olympic team in 1960. So right now, before I forget, Miracle is streaming. Not surprisingly, it was a Disney production. It is free on the Disney Channel, or the Disney streaming, I should say. And it's also free on Tubi. And if you have to, you can rent it for a couple of bucks on Prime or Apple. It is a film that got broad critical acclaim, and there was some Oscar buzz for Kurt Russell, but he didn't end up getting nominated. I don't remember offhand who was up in 2004, but it's a really great performance in the service of a story that's so preposterous. It's why Al Michaels, the famous sportscaster who was doing the commentary during the game, it's why when the time ticked down and it was under 5 seconds and the puck was nowhere near the U.S. goal, it's why Al Michaels screamed, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. Because it felt like something miraculous. It felt like something not of this earth. This can't be. They could not have won this game. but they did. They found the one shot in 20 or the one shot in 15 or the one shot in 10. Herb Brooks was being generous when he said that. They should not have been able to beat that superior team. I mean, they were outmanned every position from goalie on up. But Herb Brooks brought the team in, and the guys played outside themselves. They didn't make any mistakes in the latter portion of the game. And Eruzione just managed to get that puck, get the biscuit in the basket, as they like to say, and they held on for dear life, and they ended up winning the game. Now, the movie Miracle was a box office hit. It wasn't as big a hit as it could have been. I think it grossed between 60 and 65 million on a budget of like 20 to 30. I don't know why it wasn't a bigger hit, but it's very difficult to kind of figure these things out. I also don't know. I didn't look up to see what movies were in the marketplace at the time, because that can play a factor. If you happen to go up against a massive blockbuster, there might not be room for your little movie or smaller movie. People might go to see something else, kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean in 2003, somewhat in competition with Peter Weir's Master and Commander. Master and Commander is like one of the great films of the last 3 decades. Pirates of the Caribbean is fun. It spawned a franchise, but you can't compare the two. But people went to see Pirates of the Caribbean about 10 times more frequently than they saw Master and Commander. Just the way that it goes. Not everybody is the market for a true life inspirational sports story. And you go back in time and you think about true life inspirational sports films. Cinderella Man, the Ron Howard film with Russell Crowe as Jim Braddock, really good movie. Didn't do that well at the box office. Seabiscuit did very well at the box office. It's difficult to predict these things. Audiences are fickle, but I don't know anybody who has seen the movie Miracle who does not come away, might cry. You're probably going to cry, actually, but good tears, happy tears, not sad tears. This is not a sad film. This is a film about wanting something badly enough, maybe for decades, and actualizing that dream. It's a great film and certainly worthy of the extraordinary true story that inspired it. The 1980 United States men's hockey team on February 22nd, 1980, defeated the Russians and then ended up defeating Finland to win the gold medal. 45 years ago today, the true story, the real story, and I guess it was about 21 years ago that the movie Miracle came out, directed by Gavin O'Connor and starring Kurt Russell and Patricia Clarkson. This has been episode 451 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your late Saturday afternoon here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then,